The moment I chose to end my marriage, an unexpected gift surfaced. I could hear minds. I had always assumed my wife, who had shown me little warmth, was eager to separate. To my astonishment, I heard her inner voice weeping, questioning what to do. My husband no longer desires me, but I refuse to part ways. Oh, the sorrow. I stood there, utterly perplexed. In an instant, a blink later, I was transported back to our sophomore year, the very time I confessed my feelings to her. She, the epitome of grace on campus, publicly turned me down. Onlookers ridiculed me with biting sarcasm. Yet I distinctly heard her joyful thoughts, believing, "I'm so delighted." Ethan had finally expressed his feelings to me. Now I felt compelled to make him regret it, ensuring his sole affection remained mine. Enraged, I tore the love letter I had intended to give her right before her eyes and discarded it into the trash without a second glance. Sitting at the dinner table, I voiced my intentions to Clara, who was busy cooking. She simply pressed her lips together and replied coolly, "Can you please not bother me while I'm frying?" I forced a bitter smile, perhaps feeling exasperated with Clara. Every additional word seemed irritating. It wasn't until I handed her the divorce documents, already prepared, that she paused. "If there's nothing wrong, just sign it," I stated. She fixated on the 4 bold words on the cover, her hands trembling as she held the papers. I assumed she must be pleased. For 4 years in college and 5 years of marriage, I had clung to her like stubborn gum, relentlessly pursuing her. Without my persistent efforts, she might never have agreed to marry me. Clara's contempt for me had deeply ingrained itself. Over these 5 years, I faced the harsh reality that forced love lacks sweetness. I accepted the bitter truth. Clara doesn't care for me. No matter my efforts, she never will. It was time to awaken from this self-deceptive nightmare. Clara's lips slightly parted, and just as I was about to shake off this illusion, I heard sobbing in my ear. My husband no longer wants me. What should I do? Did I do something wrong recently? It doesn't seem like it. Oh, the sadness. I was completely confused. I stared in disbelief. It was Clara's voice. She had always been so detached, never showing such intimate concern. After our marriage, no matter how proactive I was, she pushed me away with disgust, telling me to stay distant and never touch her. How could she possibly care about my feelings? It must have been a hallucination. But then, the voice erupted again. Perhaps I should fake choking on my food, allowing my dear husband to rush me to the hospital for some time. But what would I do once we arrived? Maybe I should break my leg instead. They say bone injuries take 100 days to heal. I could delay everything as long as possible. At this point, I was utterly stunned. I was certain Clara hadn't spoken a word. What I was hearing were her inner thoughts, as if she had transformed into a completely different person. I hesitated, about to respond, but everything went black. If it's a love letter, forget it. I won't accept it. A sweet yet emotionless female voice echoed in my mind. When I opened my eyes, I was back on the familiar campus, shocked to realize I had returned to my sophomore year. At that moment, I held a love letter in my hand. 17-year-old Clara stood before me, her eyes filled with arrogance and disdain, as if mocking my confession to the campus queen. I suddenly recalled mustering the courage to declare my love for Clara that day. After secretly admiring her for 2 years, she asked, puzzled, "Why aren't you saying anything?" Her beautiful eyebrows slightly arched, but then her inner voice resonated again. "I'm so happy. He finally confessed to me. Just wait. I'll make him cry. Come on, hurry and say you like me." "What are you waiting for? I can't wait to see how heartbroken he'll be when I reject him. Why isn't he saying anything?" A bold thought struck me, and I erupted with anger. Could it be that Clara actually liked me too? Had she been pretending indifference all these years? If so, all my persistence and efforts must have made me appear foolish in her eyes. Realizing this, I clenched my fists so tightly they cracked. Clara noticed and maintained a calm demeanor, but her inner voice began to panic. "Something's wrong. Why does he look angry? Maybe I should say I need to test him, string him along to buy more time. But what if he gets truly mad and never pursues me again? What should I do then? She pouted, as if facing a difficult decision, then nervously extended her hand toward me. All right, I can accept your love letter, but that doesn't mean I'll accept your feelings. I need time to test you. Seeing her reluctant gaze, I couldn't help but laugh in disbelief. Who said this was a love letter for you? I demanded. Her eyes widened in confusion. In the next moment, I tore the envelope into pieces. Move aside, idiot. You're blocking my way to the trash can. I stepped past her and tossed the shredded paper into the bin behind her. The room fell silent. I heard Clara's breath catch. Her inner voice questioned, why did he tear up the love letter meant for me? From the corner of my eye, I saw her eyes fill with tears, on the verge of spilling over with sadness. I couldn't bring myself to say anything more. I turned away and walked away without looking back. Sitting alone in the school cafeteria, I held my chopsticks, lost in thought, trying to comprehend that I had returned to campus and was now 8 years younger. From Clara's reaction, it seemed only I had time traveled. A shout broke through my reverie. Ethan, look! There's a picture on the confession wall. My roommate handed me his phone. I had no idea who captured this candid shot. Clara's face was etched with anxiety. The cooler she had been when rejecting me earlier, the more desperately she was now rummaging through the trash. The comments section was abuzz with speculation about what could be so significant that the campus queen would discard her image like that. But I only noticed one of the torn pieces in one of the photos and scoffed. Where was all this urgency earlier? David stared at the phone in amazement, clicking his tongue. Whatever it was, it must have been incredibly important to make Clara care so much. After all, she's beautiful, has a great physique, and comes from a wealthy family. People like her start life at a finish line we ordinary folks could never reach. Whatever caught her eye and made her care so much must be something truly special. I reflected on the years I had spent by Clara's side. Other than my genuine feelings, I had nothing else of value to offer. But alas, genuine feelings are the least valuable thing of all. I laughed bitterly. Important or not, once it's in the trash, it's just trash. A young girl's clear voice suddenly interrupted me. That's not true. My wrist was grabbed. I looked up instinctively and met a pair of round, almond-shaped eyes. In that fleeting moment, her gaze trembled, and she quickly let go of my hand. Her inner voice said, no, I can't touch him after digging through the trash, but I washed my hands so many times. What if he thinks I'm dirty? I felt exasperated. Do you need something? Clara stared at me, her eyes turning red at the edges. It's not trash, I asked. What? She mumbled something indistinctly before pulling out the love letter, now taped together. Look, I put it back together. She looked at me with hopeful eyes. I frowned. The letter had been torn into tiny pieces, and reassembling it couldn't have been easy. However, I coldly responded, not holding back. The letter I wrote for my dog. Why do you like it so much? Clara's expression froze, and the next second, she whispered, I'm a dog. I was speechless. Upon returning to the dormitory, David couldn't wait to ask, seriously, Ethan, what's going on between you and Clara? You tore up the love letter you gave her and she pieced it back together. Does she like you too? What the heck? Men, what kind of magic did you use to make the campus queen fall for you like that? Tell me everything. He looked as if he had uncovered some earth-shattering secret, his eyes gleaming with excitement. But as he kept laughing, he noticed my lack of reaction and was stunned. He reached out to feel my forehead, mumbling to himself, what's going on? You don't have a fever, so why aren't you happy? I tilted my head, swatting his hand away. I'm not sick. David was shocked by my calmness. From the first day of school, from the first time I saw Clara, I had been head over heels for her. At first, it was my own secret, until David noticed how I acted around Clara, how my demeanor changed every time I encountered her, and he figured it out. From his perspective, this was great news. The person I secretly loved actually liked me back. A perfect match. But from my perspective, it felt like a cruel joke. For 9 years, I had poured my heart out to her, yet it never seemed to matter. Now, knowing she liked me all along, it was a complete farce. No wonder I couldn't be happy about it. So, I said, I used to be too much of a simp. Now I just don't want to keep being one. David was shocked again. I thought he'd continue pressing me for answers. After all, I used to be so obsessed with Clara. Now suddenly I didn't care. It must have sounded strange to him, but instead, he unexpectedly pulled 2 discount coupons for a nightclub out of his pocket. There's an event this Saturday. Spend $200 and get $15 off plus 2 free beers. You in? I was speechless. He grinned, throwing an arm around my shoulders. Who cares about troubles and heartache? A few drinks and you'll forget it all. I swear it works. Trust me. I couldn't help but laugh. I took the coupons from David and decided to go with him without hesitation. As soon as I pushed open the nightclub door, booming music assaulted me. The lights constantly shifted and flickered around me, bodies moving rhythmically on the dance floor, and the air was thick with indulgence and ambiguity. Clara loved places like this. Every time she would dress provocatively before heading out, then blatantly tell me she was going to a nightclub. It always made me grit my teeth in anger, and I'd end up layering clothes around her. She would glare at me, calling me petty and uptight before storming off to bed in frustration. To make her feel the same, I called a few friends and decided to hit the club myself. But halfway there, she intercepted me, furious, threatening divorce if I didn't go home immediately. I was speechless. Such blatant double standards. Damn it. Recalling the past, I grew angrier, feeling a loud thud inside. I slammed my glass onto the table, feeling a bit dizzy. Suddenly, a sweet voice drifted into my ear. Hey, handsome, just got out of a breakup. I turned toward the voice and saw a girl sitting beside me. Forget about those trashy girls. A guy as good-looking as you deserves better. She rested her chin in her hand, smiling softly. She embodied sweetness. Just a glance was enough to stir the heart. Her lips shimmered with glossy lip gloss, and her smile carried a flirtatious sweetness. David, sitting nearby, elbowed me repeatedly and nodded toward her, grinning. This one's good. Way better than that ice-cold Clara. What's that saying? Give up on one crooked tree and you've got a whole forest. Just as I was about to respond, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. Clara, with a cold expression, was striding angrily toward me. I froze. In an instant, my drunkenness began to fade. She stopped right in front of me, and the temperature around us seemed to drop. Clara glared at me, and the girl beside me bolted in fear. I was about to tell her she forgot her drink, but she had already disappeared. Clara said, "What, liking what you see?" For once, Clara smiled at me. But the more I looked at that smile, the more ominous it seemed, like the calm before a storm. She gripped the hem of her skirt, biting her lip as she said, "Still looking. Do you really like looking that much? Want me to go get her for you before she gets too far?" I was speechless. No need to trouble yourself. For the first time, seeing her this angry made me scratch my head awkwardly. The next second, David groaned dramatically. "Oh man, I think I'm drunk." And then he dramatically collapsed onto the table, trying to look cool. I was speechless. Clara looked at David and said, "I've contacted your sister to pick you up. She's already outside." No sooner had she finished speaking than David popped up from the table shouting, "Got it. Thanks a lot. Catch you later." I was speechless. I must have gone crazy. Before I knew it, Clara grabbed my earlobe and yanked. It hurt. "You, come with me." She dragged me by the ear and started marching outside. "Let go. What do you think you're doing?" I tried to break free, but she suddenly turned around and bit down hard on my lips. "Don't move." I was completely baffled, the faint scent of her perfume lingering on my lips. Clara dragged me through the crowd, pulling me along as we navigated through the throngs of people. Her small figure led the way, and I suddenly felt a moment of déjà vu. It overlapped with the cold and distant version of her who used to walk away from me without a second thought. By the time we reached the bar's entrance, She pushed me into the passenger seat. Her petite figure stood right in front of me, her almond-shaped eyes glaring angrily. The next second, she leaned in, and instinctively I leaned back, wary. Seeing me avoid her only made her angrier. Clara said, "Ethan, you've really learned some tricks, haven't you? You used to promise me you'd never drink or smoke, and now you've had several drinks and learned to flirt with other girls too." Huh? My eyes widened in shock. Could the Clara standing in front of me also be the Clara from 8 years in the future? I snapped. "Who do you think you are? What I drink, who I talk to, has nothing to do with you." Her face flushed as she shouted, "You can't talk to anyone else. You just can't. I won't allow it." I was speechless. I was about to open the door and leave, but suddenly she slammed her foot on the gas. I couldn't wrestle the steering wheel from her, and jumping out of the car wasn't an option. I couldn't escape, nor could I leave. Since there was no way out, I might as well see what she was up to. She drove us all the way to the apartment we had rented when we first got together. As soon as we entered, the lights weren't even on before she threw herself into my arms. "Do you really not like me anymore?" Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of pleading in it. The soft moonlight shining through the windows cast a shadow of sadness on her face. I found it laughable. She was the one who had wronged me. So why did she look like the one who was hurt? I took a deep breath, chuckling coldly. "Yes, I stopped liking you a long time ago." But Clara only tightened her grip on my wrist, pressing me further. "Then who do you like?" "That girl from earlier." "That's right." I lowered my head and looked her in the eye. "Not just her. I like any girl with a nice figure." Suddenly, she stood on her tiptoes and kissed me hard on the lips. I pushed her away. She bit her lip in frustration, her eyes brimming with tears on the verge of falling. "I don't believe you. You're lying to me." I turned away, unwilling to look at her. "Don't think that this will make me feel sorry for you." I sighed softly. "Clara, this trick doesn't work on me anymore." The moment those words left my mouth, her tears began to fall one after another. I stayed silent, but the longer I remained quiet, the harder she cried. She tugged at my sleeve, cautiously looking at me as she said, "Are you really mad? You can scold me however you want. Just don't ignore me. Don't be so cold." I thought about how I had showered her with care and affection for years. She had enjoyed all the attention I gave her while treating me like a fool, playing me for laughs. Now that I didn't want to deal with her anymore, she was the one coming to me. What a strange person. Seeing that I remained silent, she lowered her gaze in disappointment, almost leaning into me. "Ethan, talk to me, please. I know I was wrong." She placed my hands on her cheeks, gently rubbing them against mine, pleading sweetly. But all I felt was disgust, and I quickly pulled my hands away. I didn't want to touch her for even another second. My expression turned cold as I mockingly said, "A broken mirror can't be pieced back together, just like that love letter you tore up. Once it's broken, it's broken. No matter how much you try to put it back together, it'll never be the same as it was. Delayed affection is more worthless than grass." But then she pulled a pristine love letter out of her pocket, handing it to me with an even more cautious gaze. I wrote a new one. "See, this one is intact." I was so furious, I was at a loss for words. In fact, I almost laughed. "Do you think this is funny? Do you think I can't live without you, Clara? Do you enjoy seeing me grovel? Is that why you're not used to anyone groveling at your feet anymore? What do you take me for?" There was a flash of panic in Clara's eyes. "I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that." I cut her off, interrupting her. "You rejected me on the surface, but kept stringing me along in your heart, wanting to see me in pain after I got rejected. What didn't you mean? Are you some kind of sadist?" She froze. My smile only grew colder as I watched her face after her lies were exposed. But Clara's expression only grew more pitiful as she softly said, "But isn't that what loving someone is like? Isn't it supposed to hurt? Isn't it supposed to be painful?" I was utterly dumbfounded and confused. I didn't understand what she was trying to say. Seeing my expression, She bit her lip, but didn't explain further. Instead, she turned and switched on the lights in the living room, pulling me into another room. "Wait a second," she said. She stepped onto a stool and reached for a thick photo album from the highest shelf of the bookcase, dusting it off. She opened it, unlocking memories long buried. When you love someone, you naturally want to know everything about them. But in the 9 years I had known you, you never mentioned anything about your parents. From dating to marriage, I hadn't even met them. Whenever I tried to find out, I hit a dead end. You never spoke of them, and after so many failed attempts, I eventually gave up. Now, the mystery that had plagued me for years was finally going to be answered. "This is my mother." She pointed to a woman in the photo. The background was a park, and she was holding Clara, who couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 years old at the time. She was beautiful, elegant, and poised. Her smile was warm and soft, her eyes full of light. But as we flipped through more photos, her smile faded, and the light in her eyes gradually disappeared. Clara then pointed to a blank spot in another photo, saying, "And here is my father." If I had to guess, this was meant to be a family photo, but the figure had been cut out with scissors, leaving the image shredded. Many of the other photos had similar cuts, some even showing signs of being burned. It was shocking to look at. My mother loved my father very much, but he always made her cry. At that time, Clara was too young to understand anything, just learning to speak. But even at that age, she could sense her mother's sadness. Curious, she asked why her mother was always crying. Her mother would hold her and cry even harder, answering that it was because she loved her father too much. Loving someone can bring happy tears, but it can also bring tears of pain. In the end, her mother's tears couldn't keep him, and they chose to part ways. They both went on to build new lives, forming new families. Clara, however, became the obstacle and blemish between them. They gave her plenty of money, but never gave her any love again. In the beginning, she had been their cherished baby girl, their one and only princess. Some people spend their entire lives trying to heal from childhood wounds. Clara seemed accustomed to living alone, independent, but deep down, she always longed for love. Yet, while she craved love, she never believed she deserved it, so she would test again and again whether someone would leave her, pushing away those who loved her to find some sense of security. She continued, "You once told me that the moment you saw me on the first day of school, you fell for me." As she said this, she looked up at me, her gaze flickering. She continued, "But what you didn't know is that in that same moment, I fell for you too." One side of the bookshelf slowly opened, revealing something that left me in utter shock. It was a massive butterfly wall. Just one glance was enough to leave a powerful impression. Upon closer inspection, I realized it was made up of countless photos. I walked closer, and to my surprise, I saw that I appeared in almost every single one. "That's from the first time we met. I secretly took it while you weren't looking." Clara stood next to me, pointing to the photo at the very top. Memories flooded back. It was from the first day of school. I had 8 bags of luggage strapped to me, along with 2 large 28-inch suitcases, struggling to drag everything along. But actually, only one of the suitcases was mine. The rest belonged to David. He had dashed off to the bathroom, unable to wait even a second longer, and left me with all his luggage. When I saw how much he had brought, I was dumbfounded. It wasn't just luggage. It was like he had moved his whole house. Even now, thinking back, I still felt like I'd been completely played by him, she said. "I saw you by accident, and I thought you were amazing. So confident, so kind, and willing to help a friend. No matter how tough or tiring it was, you didn't complain." Clara's lips curved into a smile as if lost in a warm memory. Meanwhile, I was already picturing myself punching David again. She continued, "I actually walked over to ask if you needed any help." Confused, I asked, but I had no memory of this at all. I didn't know that Clara had noticed me long before I ever noticed her. "You had so much luggage on your shoulders, you didn't see me, and one of the suitcases rolled over and hit my foot." Clara paused for a moment before continuing. Then you just pushed it forward, rolling right over me. I was speechless. Now that she mentioned it, I vaguely remembered something like that. At the time, I thought the suitcase had gotten stuck on a rock or something, and I was too lazy to move it, so I just pushed it forward. Turns out, I had rolled right over her foot, feeling embarrassed. I quickly apologized. "I'm so sorry, I didn't notice at the time," she continued. She pointed to another photo of me standing alone, holding 3 ice creams. "At first, I thought you were bringing them for your friends, but I followed you the whole way and watched you eat them all by yourself." As she spoke, a faint hint of envy appeared in Clara's eyes, and she softly remarked, "What an appetite you had. You really could eat." I was speechless. No, seriously. I put my hand to my forehead, feeling completely exasperated. Other girls are attracted to guys for their masculine charm, but for you, everything seems so different. She continued, "And this one—" I interrupted. "All right, that's enough. Stop, please. That's enough. Any more, and I might actually want to crawl into a hole and disappear." She was digging up every embarrassing thing about me. Besides, I was the one who confessed to you first. Hearing this, my brain completely froze. When was that? I racked my brain but had no memory of it. Seeing my confused look, Clara pulled out her phone and opened her social media feed. The day before I gave her my love letter, she had posted a picture with the caption, "Under the same sky." I frowned and asked, "So what does that mean?" She replied earnestly, "It was taken by the research building. At the time, you were just finishing class. If you looked up, you would have seen the same sky I was looking at. The meaning is, we were under the same sky. Doesn't that sound like a beautiful confession?" Clara looked at me with anticipation, like a child waiting to be praised. Once again, I was speechless. "Hold on, little girl. There's no way anyone could have figured that out without a microscope. I couldn't understand it at all." She went on, "But at the time, you even liked my post. I thought you understood." I twitched my mouth. "I'd never been this at a loss for words in my life," she said, "and I wasn't being cold to you." Clara swallowed the dryness in her throat and patiently explained, "I know everything about you, your likes, your dislikes, and many of your habits." I asked, "Like what?" She replied, "Like how you smile when you're happy and feel sad when you're not, how you get hungry and want to eat, and how you get thirsty and want to drink water." I was silent for a moment. Give me something a little deeper than basic human biology. She muttered on about many things, like the dishes I ate and the soup I drank. She used to say she didn't care what I liked and would cook whatever she wanted. But everything she made was exactly what I loved. At the time, I thought it was odd how similar our tastes were. I asked, "Then why didn't you ever say anything? You knew everything about me, and I was eager to learn everything about you." But she had locked herself away, never giving me the chance. I spent 9 years trying, and I couldn't even crack the door open a little. It felt awful. Back then, I even thought you looked down on me or had someone else in your heart, which was why you treated me so coldly. Clara lowered her eyes, looking dejected as she said, "Because I wanted to show you my best side. I was afraid that the more you got to know me, the more disappointed you would be. If that happened, you wouldn't like me anymore." She was terrified that if I truly got to know her, I'd be disappointed and would abandon her once again. She always thought it was her fault, that she wasn't good enough, which is why her parents so easily cast her aside. If only I had been an outstanding, exceptional child. If only I could have made them proud. Maybe then they would have cared about me a little more. I urgently said, "But that's their problem. You did nothing wrong. You don't have to do anything to please them. And you definitely shouldn't blame yourself." Her eyes were misty with unshed tears. "Meeting you was like a withered tree encountering the arrival of spring. And once someone has been illuminated by light, how could they ever willingly return to the dark abyss?" I cupped her face in my hands, looking into her eyes, and spoke each word slowly. "But when you truly love someone, you love everything about them. You love their brightness, and you also love their fragility. If you only love what's on the surface, that's not love. It's just a fleeting moment of excitement. Clara smiled faintly, with a hint of sorrow, and said, "It's a pity I realized it too late and learned too slowly. I made you unhappy for so long because it wasn't until later that I understood. When you love someone, you feel their pain, and you don't want them to have any negative feelings." She raised her hand, her fingertips gently brushing the lines on the butterfly wall she had woven by hand, as if creating a cage meant to trap this butterfly. If she could, she would want me to stay with her forever. But if being close to her meant being close to sadness, she would rather cut these threads herself and let me go. It seemed like she wanted to trap me. But in truth, she had always been trapping herself. The night before I handed her the divorce papers, she'd made a wish on a falling star because she realized that I didn't seem happy all these years, and she hadn't even noticed my love for her. She knew it was all her fault. So she wished on the star, asking if she could go back in time and give me another chance to choose, even if it meant losing me completely. "Ethan," she called softly, gazing at me with deep affection. "I've told you everything about me, so do you still like me? Do you like this imperfect version of me?" My thoughts were a jumble. I did like her. That was true. After all, you can't just cut off years of feelings and say you don't care anymore. But everything we had been through, those moments, were also real. I was confused and took a deep breath, saying, "Sorry, I don't know, at least not right now." I couldn't give her the answer she wanted. My response was probably what she expected. She smiled gently and said, "It's okay, take your time. Time will give us the answer. At the very least, now that everything is out in the open, we have a new, better understanding of each other." When it came to our relationship, Clara was no longer walking on eggshells. She had finally learned to express herself openly and confront her emotions and needs. She even started sharing the beautiful things she encountered in her life with me. But she had also grown more spoiled than before. One time on the field, she tripped and fell. Just a second before, she had told her friends she wasn't hurt, and it didn't hurt at all. But the moment she saw me, she immediately pouted and started whining. "It hurts so much. Handsome, can you help me up?" I was speechless. She never used to like sweets, but now, when we go out, she'll buy 2 cups of milk tea, one for each of us. It reminded me of the time when Clara and I first became a couple and went on our first date. I had excitedly bought 2 taro bubble teas, thinking all girls liked sweet things. It was a new flavor, and it tasted great. I had waited in line for half an hour, eager to give it to her. But at the time, Clara drank it with a frown the entire time and told me, "Next time, if you buy this again, you can drink both yourself." I was baffled by her reaction. I couldn't tell if she hated the tea or hated me. I chalked it up to her being on a diet, trying to stay in shape and not wanting to eat too many sweets. This time, Clara finally explained, "It was just too sweet for me. I wasn't used to it. When I was young, I actually liked sweets, but my teeth got cavities, and I once had such unbearable pain that I was clutching half of my face. Nobody was there to take care of me. My parents had divorced, leaving me alone in a big house with only a nanny to look after me. When the nanny left after work, I didn't know what to do. In the end, the pain became so unbearable that I used the house phone to call an ambulance. I was so young at the time and absolutely terrified. Ever since then, I didn't dare eat sweets." Clara clumsily explained, "Afraid I wouldn't understand." Gesturing wildly, she said, "At the time, I saw how upset you looked, and I realized I must have said something wrong, but I didn't mean it the way you thought." I couldn't help but find it both childish and amusing. She tried even harder to explain herself. "Really, you have to believe me." I responded, all right, I believe you." After spending all this time together again, I could see that many of her contradictions weren't intentional. She would think one thing, but once the words left her mouth, they would somehow come out all wrong. It was truly bizarre. She added, "Actually, after I went home that day, I ordered another cup of the same milk tea." Slowly, she started to accept that eating sweets wasn't the painful experience it had been in her childhood. On the contrary, sweets could lift her mood. She began imitating my preferences, learning things that no one had ever taught her, like a clumsy child figuring things out step by watching others. I had spent 9 years teaching her how to love, and with my sincerity, I showed her that everyone deserves love, but to be loved, you first have to learn to love yourself. She gradually learned. The remaining 3 years of college passed peacefully. We each focused on our own lives. We chatted normally during the day, and during our free time, we would take walks around the track, watching the evening sun set in the sky, feeling the breeze, walking at a leisurely pace. We talked about the past and discussed our future, until the day of graduation when she beat me to it and publicly confessed her love to me at the ceremony. Cheers erupted from the crowd as she stood on stage. She held a sunflower symbolizing loyalty and quiet strength. Her gaze was intense, full of deep affection. "Ethan?" she called softly, repeating the same question from before. "So, do you still like me?" I looked at her face and smiled brightly this time. I answered her with certainty as the words left my mouth. The sun rose from behind the clouds, bathing everything in light. The sunflower in her hands glowed with warmth and brilliance, just like her, and from that moment, we embarked on a new future together.